that chops up your conversation and puts it out over the cell tower, right? Where it's on radio waves till it gets to the next cell tower. That cell tower decides where that packet goes and it sends it off on its way. 5G can't work that way because 5G can't sustain a great distance. It really is susceptible to the energy failure on the wavelength and the square of the distance inversion, right? So that you have to pump in vast quantities of energy just to get it to go an extra couple of inches. But 5G is incredibly valuable because you can get so much in the way of bandwidth over it. So we could get 1 million conversations over the same bandwidth if it was on 5G that we, and 1/1 millionth of that over cell tower. So it has this really cool part of it, but it's also very interesting in a couple of ways. 5G allows you to track things in a way that our current cell system does not. Okay, so 5G network, because they have to have many of these devices, like on every corner, every street corner, on the tops of buildings, inside buildings, all over, because you're dealing with distances that are like 2 and 3 and 5 feet sometimes, just down a short hallway before it has to bend, and then you're going to have another repeater. Because of that, they'll be able to track things down to just a percentage of movement that is just incredibly fine. So now you might know a guy with a cell phone went into a building. With 5G, you would know that he's walking into his kitchen and that he's about to go over to the window. You would know that kind of level, right? Now, 5G also has another aspect to it. The 5G handling within TSA brought up some language within the woo-woo world that made me wonder, could that possibly be true? And the 5G within the TSA scanners might, because of this language repeating itself often enough from enough official sources, I have a tendency to say it might have been used not for the purpose that they stated. I mean, that was obvious, okay, that you're never going to find somebody carrying a gun with 5G, right? But they could maybe, because of what it does in terms of DNA and so forth, they could have maybe found hybrids. Aliens. And see, that's what's going on at the moment, getting back to our theme, right? Our theme is that Earth is being invaded right now. Our theme is that our LARP is running here, that we're all living a live action role playing against like a 1960s invaders movie, right? Okay, that series, Roy Thinnis or somebody, right? He was the actor in it. And they had a telltale, they didn't have a little finger and they had to have a prosthetic or something. We don't have that, okay? Unfortunately, we don't have that. These aliens have been, according to the abductees, have been hybridizing abductees for decades now. And it may have been going on for thousands of years. It gives one pause to wonder what happened to Neanderthal, Cro-Magnon, Australopithecus, all these other hominids. What happened to them? We should not have displaced Neanderthal. At the time that Neanderthal dominated Europe, humans were hardly a presence. And we could interbreed with them and this kind of thing, but they were an entirely different species than us. And they disappeared as though literally lifted off the planet and taken away. We're only talking populations in the 1 and 2 and 3 and 5 million, that sort of thing, right? So not huge giant populations, but nonetheless very interesting. So 5G could have been used, for instance, to pick up a non-human DNA as they went through those scanners. And it would have allowed the military to track such individuals moving through our populace. Because now in our LARP, bear in mind in our LARP, I think the US military is aware of this space alien invasion. And I think they're putting out all kinds of disinformation anytime it gets close to reality, such that people won't take it seriously. I also think that the space aliens themselves are doing things to try and dampen our natural curiosity into their activities such that it doesn't get overblown and that we don't really tumble to this, and that they're actually doing things within our minds, individually and collectively, to keep us from discussing the subject of abductees, to keep us from taking it seriously. Both sides are attempting to do this because it doesn't bode well for our side, for all of us to really react and run around screaming like the Martians are here, right? Because we don't have that music yet. We don't yet know what it is that's going to make their heads explode. I think I've got a few ideas, and I've been thinking about this for some time now. I've got many sources for this, so let's get into some of that, okay? First off, as I pointed out, we have the evidence of absence. Nobody talks about abductions, yet there's millions going on every year. And these millions always have this consistent pattern. And it doesn't matter who the investigators are. And it doesn't matter what language the investigators operate in. So I've got a book here by David Jacobs. And he wrote a book on the alien plan to control humanity. And I think he's probably fairly accurate about what he's saying, because I find that there's Spanish researchers writing about this in great detail. Very much the same language, very much duplicating what US abductees are saying, or it's being replicated in abductees from Latin America and from Africa. We also see the similar concepts from the abductees that report this in Russia. And in Russia and China, the abductees are talking a little bit more. There's also curious movements going on among the government, okay, governments of the planet. So we could hypothesize, if we were on like a giant game of Risk, you know, the strategy game, that right now there's something going on that seems to suggest the USA government might be captive by the aliens. And the Chinese and the Russians don't like this, because the Chinese, you'll notice the Canadians arrested the Huawei fellow, the 5G woman, right? Okay. And why was that? Well, there's a lot of talk about trade talks, but what if our guys were under the control of some of these hybrids and the security office of the space aliens, and they don't want 5G to propagate throughout North America, and so they're going to start throwing roadblocks in front of the 5G wave. There's a real problem here. Our problem is twofold. Strategically, the US may be the most infiltrated. Also, we have the largest available infrastructure of coherent electricity for building a 5G network. So China is going to take decades and decades and decades to get a 5G network built because of their topology, because of the problems with the electricity, their social dynamics, etc. Russia's going to take a long time because they're spread out. Although Russia has the advantage, they'll be able to do the cities relatively quickly. And in a 5G network, there's two aspects. Okay, so let's jump way back. The space aliens can control our minds. They can actually control the neural pathways in our brains, and they can do so such that they could eliminate me from your vision. I could be sitting there, I could be coughing and hacking, and they decide what you will hear and see of my presence. And they can do this relatively easily. Okay, so they are able to control our brains through their inbuilt telepathic abilities. They're putting some of these telepathic abilities into the hybrids, and they put some telepathic abilities into the next generation, which we could call the, I guess that would be the haploids, okay, the hybridized hybrids. They're closer to human. So those ones are the ones that are attempting to inject into our society. Those ones have less telepathic ability than their progenitors, and far less than the actual space aliens. These space aliens control our neuropathy through the what we might think of as the ability to feel electrical fields. Okay, these space aliens are not hominids. Space aliens create hominid-like biological robots, the Greys, reptilians even, to serve their needs. The reptilians, though, are a waning species. It's not like the Project Camelot guys. It's not like any of these whistleblowers that have provided names to them and say they come from Draconis or any of this. All of that is totally bogus. In our LARP, the reptilians were an offshoot that the space aliens did, because the reptilians are extremely easy to control mentally. The reason they're easy to control mentally is because they have a very nascent, very primitive vagus nervous system. It is my conclusion that the more advanced your vagus nervous system, the less ability you have for mind control, as the space aliens are doing it now. And there's many things I could go into as to why I have concluded that, but we can just pass on at the moment and go on to other things. The 5G network, getting back to our subject previously, could be used, in my opinion, to disrupt the ability of the hybrids to control human thought, and also disrupt the ability of the space aliens to control human thought. So it may be that in order to have a free mind in the future, because this is ongoing, they're not going to stop because of the nature of these space aliens. They've never known defeat as we understand it. But we may find that in the future, we have to live in 5G envelopes in order to be relatively free from being screwed with by the space aliens as they proceed with their evil plan to conquer Earth, assuming that that's their goal. The space aliens themselves, I know something about, and they're just a strange crew. And we have to understand that we may be fighting them without really even understanding what their goal is.
Let's talk about that for a minute, because I've had, I want to talk about Daryl Sims for just a second, because when you brought up the reptilians being designed to be controlled biogenetically, well, he says that he has evidence for a craft, a huge craft that orbits Earth. They clone different beings, greys, reptilians, and then he'll even say, well, then you've got the Nordics and they're like the Corvette model. And he thinks they're cloned because they don't have belly buttons. He talks about how he worked for the company for a couple of years. Then he stopped working for the company, but he calls himself the alien hunter. He's been on many broadcasts and has shown evidence for implant removals. So,
I've actually had that myself, by the way. I've had
okay.
2 of those implants. And that brings up another subject we should discuss, which is those people that have been abducted once only. Because see, here's the thing. If you were, for instance, stating that, we'll go back to Daryl in a minute, but if you were stating, as you said earlier, that you and your family have had past history of this kind of thing, then you're in that multi-generational normal curve for abductees. Most abductees fall in that category. I'm in an outlier group where I've had missing time, which is one of the associations you get as an abductee, where I've had the screwy memories and stuff. And I've also had implants removed from me, right? But as near as I can tell, I've only been abducted once. And so that brings up an issue as to why some people are only abducted once. And I think I have some thoughts on that. But get back to Daryl, please.
Well, the only reason I brought up Daryl is because it's kind of confirming what you're saying, because you were talking about the reptilians, and then he's talking about these beings that are cloned to do specific jobs, and that just validates what you're talking about. So my question on that is, these beings that are here that are infiltrating, do you think they're kind of a part of that same clan? And do you think they could be using us to be creating technologies, and they're like, okay, we'll let them do the work, we'll let them design these technologies? Or do you think they're way advanced?
I think they're way advanced. I don't think that they deal with technology the way we do. They're not as keyed in on it. These people that are being infiltrated into our society are going to be used to control us. I know that. I know that that is going to be one of the goals. How long that control lasts is another issue. These people that are being brought into this society may be here to replace us. Okay, so no humans might be here 200 years from now, the same way that it took less than 200 years for Neanderthal to go.
Do you think that Bigfoot, or these sightings of Yetis, Bigfoots, etc., do you think they could be the original Neanderthals?
No, nothing like that. Okay, those kind of things, we have to be very, okay, so now here's the issue. Within our LARP, let's understand that imagining oneself in a situation where there's an alien invasion and the aliens use mind control as a huge part of as in fact their only primary weapon, then one must, in my opinion, be very disciplined with their own thoughts when thinking about this, and not allow dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine to cause your thoughts to go off into an area where you would make assumptions that can't be proven. And if you're going into an area where you can't make anything, make any proven statements out of it, then best leave it alone, because we don't have the time for diversions. That's why I'm really pissed, even more so now than I was in the past, about some of the people within the woo-woo society, within woo-woo community, because they're leading us in areas, then they're sucking the air out of the room, et cetera. And we don't need that now. We need the ability to think clearly and very hard-headed and creative about our situation. Or Rex won't necessarily be here 50 years from now to retire, because he will simply have been eliminated, and he won't be needed anymore because the invasion will have progressed a great deal. Now, this invasion may have been going on for the last 80 years. If they're doing 1 million a year in abductions, and these abductees are only being abducted to train the infiltrators, and the abductees are being replaced back in the society each and every night, and only being used to train infiltrators, as I say, then how many infiltrators per year can 1 million people train in the United States? And here's some of the weird things about this, okay? You get individuals like Corey Good saying, oh, there's millions of abductions a year, and most of them never come back. Well, that's a bogus statement, right? Okay, and it also is a diverting statement, because from that point on, you as the listener are not going to think appropriately about the abductions. You're going to go off on, well, he's full of it, blah, 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 right? And so you're not going to think about appropriately about the abduction phenomenon that is actually occurring right now. And all of the common threads, the hugest common thread of the whole thing is that these abductees are training infiltrators. They're training quasi-humans, the third generation humanoid hybrids, to infiltrate and live in our society. And I've had some over the years, I've had some instances, okay, where there were just strange things being reported to me, and I didn't know what to make of them, that I'm now of the opinion were perhaps participatory in this. Okay, and one of them was a situation where there was this guy in Germany that had this very curious tale to tell me in the year 2007. And he rented a apartment. He owned a bunch of apartments. That was his job. He rented and managed his apartments. And he was, I think, in his 30s then. This was like 2006, 2007, something like that. And he rented out a top floor, which was 2 apartments,